absolute essential element of unconditional love. Like truly unconditional love, and your kids feel it.
A lot of people, when they reflect back on their dads and how present they were in their lives, they didn't realize at the time how much of a sacrifice it was.
What do you need? Do you need me to stay or do you need me to go? And he said, I need you to stay. And I still wrestled with it. You just have to put yourself truly in like, what do I want? And you have to do hard things sometimes, but it makes such a big difference.
All right, welcome to the Rad Dad Podcast. This is episode 18. I have my good friend Eric Jacobson here. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
We discussed having you on just over a week ago, probably, but glad to have you here. Just to start off, I've never talked to you about where you grew up and like your upbringing, so just give me the rundown on where you grew up and some highlights of your childhood.
Yeah, I grew up in Orem, Utah, so not too far away. And I'm the oldest of 4 siblings. I have 3 younger sisters. Me and my one sister that's 2 years younger than me, and then I have 2 sisters that are adopted. They're like a decade gap between us and them.
Okay.
And I just nothing too fancy or exciting about that life. Just being the only boy growing up. Grew up with a dad that introduced me and kept me interested in sports and stuff like that. And then my mom was very domestic, and so she taught me how to cook and cross stitch and all those things.
So you're the oldest?
I'm the oldest.
Okay.
Yeah, the oldest in the family. So,
and then 3 girls below you. So that's why you're such a good girl dad, right?
That's right. I only have 1 girl, but yeah. I don't know if I was the best brother though. So if my sisters watch this, they'll be like, yeah.
So do you drive up to Orem and
they're here in Spanish Fork now.
But when you go to Orem, do you think like this place has just gone crazy?
Yeah.
Like you remember it where it was still kind of small
There's orchards and I could go pick asparagus in the orchard next to my house.
Yep.
Yeah. Life was a lot more like Spanish Fork is now, but was a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you remember? What are some highlights about like observing your dad, as you were growing up through the years? What stood out to you about your father?
Yeah, my dad was just always kind and fun. And that's always seen, even like turning into grandpa, like he's just the guy that always just wants to have fun and joke around and just be, on the floor with kids and just enjoying that. And he'd always go, play basketball. I think I still feel bad though, because like the last memory I have of playing basketball, because we'd always play in our front yard. And I finally got taller than him. And I remember the last time we played, I swatted him every time and he didn't make a shot. And that was the last time that we played. But I also remember as a kid though, like playing ping pong. We had a ping pong table in our basement.
Yeah.
And every day, like we'd go down and play a couple games. And in my journal that I kept as a kid, I'd write the scores of our games. And so like those are like such meaningful experiences for me. Is like I think about my dad is like he'd do stuff with me. He was a big racquetball guy. So I always knew after work he'd go play racquetball before he'd come home. Yeah. And he taught me how to play those sports, which have, been a huge blessing in my life now with my current hobbies and loves. Yeah. So, yeah.
Now that I'm a dad and I'm kind of learning, what it takes to be a father, I feel like a lot of people, when they reflect back on their dads and how present they were in their lives, they didn't realize at the time how much of a sacrifice it was.
Yeah. Or
maybe like your dad's like the happy, always have fun guy, but now as a father, it can be challenging and like things are going on in the back of your head and to get home and have the energy to go be with your kids you have a better appreciation once you become a dad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's not easy all the time. Yeah, for sure.
So talk to me about your experience becoming a dad.
Yeah. So
like your firstborn and.
Yeah. So my oldest is almost 18 now. So it's been almost 18 years since first becoming a dad. And I'll admit, like, it wasn't like love at first sight. Like I grew into it.
Yeah.
I remember, and both Rach and my wife and I, like, we both, like, when we first saw him, we're like, what is this, like, alien? Looked like an old man. I was just like, it's just weird that, like, we're going to take this child home.
Yeah.
And for me, I think it really just kind of grew into that love. And once I could actually really, like, interact with him and do stuff, like, that's when things shifted for me. And so for me, like, babies are great. That's fine. But like my love of a dad really like came as they started to like really being able to do things together and we could engage. And, my oldest, like we are so alike in so many ways. And so like seeing those things and seeing myself through his eyes, just makes, I don't know, that's just when things really connected for me.
I feel like I have had a very similar experience with fatherhood.
Yeah.
Like those first few months, it was really hard for me because I'm like, I can't connect to this human.
Yeah.
Because I'm very like hands-on. Like I want to, you know, I look forward to the moments where I can play and they smile and I get a reaction and then they start to talk. Yeah. That's what I was looking forward to. And it was like, hey, wake up. You got like a year of just this baby that poops and eats, you know?
You got to just make it through that.
Yeah.
And some people love that and just love having that infant. But for
Right.
me, I'm just like, I could skip that part.
Yeah.
There's an important bonding part, but like, yeah, once I could connect and do things, that's when things shifted for me.
Do you feel, or did you feel more prepared when your second child came? I mean, we have one on the way now.
Yeah.
And I like to tell myself I'm more prepared, but then I see people with newborns. I'm like, crap, I'm not ready for this. Like, did you feel as or more prepared for your second one? Or?
I mean, I wasn't as scary to like that they sent me home from the hospital with him. I was
Yeah.
like, are you really sending me? Like, I was more okay with it, but like, it was still like, it's definitely easier, but.
So my second child, the one that's on the way, is a girl as well.
Yeah.
Was your experience different having a girl?
A little bit.
Yeah.
There's just a different softness, I guess, for having a daughter.
I need that.
Yeah. So it was just, there's a different connection I think I felt with her. And, you know, even throughout that she's gotten older, you know, that she's 15, like, there's just a different connection you have. I'm grateful I have a daughter.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So in these 18 years of fatherhood that you've experienced, what are some lessons that have just surprised you? Like stuff that you may not have learned outside of fatherhood?
Yeah. The first one that comes to mind, and I can't take credit for it, I have to give credit to my wife for it, is like the absolute essential element of unconditional love. Like truly unconditional love. And your kids feel it. And every one of my kids, I've had to go through a phase of where I didn't connect with them and didn't feel a closeness to them. And every one of them in a different way, I had to help them feel like, I love you unconditionally. You can say whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. Like you can make mistakes.
Yeah.
You can do things that I'm like, why in the world did you do that? But I love you no matter what. And I don't think I could learn that any other way. And I can think about moments where a kid comes and they just like bring a tough issue to you. And there's those moments, they're moments of truth as a father. Are you going to freak out on them? Are you going to be like, what the heck are you thinking? Or are you going to be like, I'm sorry, like that's hard and I love you and it's going to be okay and we're going to figure this out. Like there's been those moments that I've had to have, and it's been different for each one of them. But like number one thing is they have to feel that and know that no matter what they do, it doesn't change how much you love them. You may not love what they did, but they feel that. And that's been the single most important and most powerful thing in the relationship that I have with my kids now.
I've been thinking about that a lot of how do I communicate that to my kids? Is it more of like like you have to teach them by example, or are there certain conversations you have? Like how do you portray that message to your kids and make sure they receive it?
Just persistence. Like even when they push you away, like my daughter, Ava, she probably pushed the hardest. And I think they're sometimes testing you to see like, is their love like truly like beyond what I'm giving you? Yeah. And so a lot of it is just like, I mean, every kid has different love languages, but like, just the hugs or just like the going and listening and just time. And also just like, it's that response, you know, people sense like, are you angry? Are you frustrated? Like just spending the time with them. So they just feel like you're with me. You spent time with me. You're giving me a hug, even though like I just yelled at you. Like those are the moments. Like those are the moments that just sink in, and it just cements for them like, Dad's safe. Dad's here. Yeah. And I can go to him and be safe place with him. But it's repetitive and it's easy to break it. So you just have to build those deposits every time you have those tough moments.
I feel like one of the greatest things that we can give it to anyone we love is just our presence.
Yeah. Just
like
time.
a lot of times I feel like I don't even have the words to help people, you know, but just being there, I feel like makes a difference.
Yeah.
So you said that your wife, Rachel, really helped you to learn this. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like what you learned from her?
Well, just through her recognizing for herself.
Mm.
Cause she went through that, cause her and my daughter are really like, and in a lot of ways. And so they just will butt heads and they'll hurt each other. But then I've watched her go back and just ask for that forgiveness, ask for like, I'm sorry. And to see that, and just her being like, you have to love unconditionally. And I remember she learned it from, she heard it from Melissa Lunt, who's in our neighborhood in our ward. And she's like, she taught a lesson or something one time and just talked about that. And it just sunk in with her. And she just became focused on it. And then anytime I'd do something stupid as a dad, where I'd miss something, she'd just be like, she'd just teach me and be like, you got to do this differently. And it's just through that just process of trial and error. And just recognizing over time. And for me, it's easier when I can talk rationally to an older kid. I had a hard time with the younger kids because it's like there's not this rational part of their brain working yet. And once we could actually, like, they get older and I could have a intellectual conversation with them too and talk through it, it made it a whole lot easier for me and my personality. Because kids are just, I was way more impatient when I had young kids, and I'm way more patient with my older kids. They make mistakes and do stupid stuff, but it's like, my blood pressure rarely rises. With younger kids, it was, a lot more.
Yeah, no, that makes
I've tempered
sense.
a lot as they've gotten.
I think I can relate to that.
But I love, like, a lot of people you're like, I don't like teenagers. I'm like, I'd stay here forever because I got a 13, 15, 17-year-old kids, and it's like the best because I just love hanging out with them. We get to do things. We have a lot of common interests, and it's just, there's just a connection that I have that I love teenagers. Yeah, it's something to look forward to, at least for me. Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know if you had the same perception, but when I was growing up, I was like, man, my parents just got to figure it out. Like I could go to them with any problem, and they always had an answer that like worked for me. Yeah. But I think I'm realizing like they were kind of winging it too. Yeah. You know,
always. Yeah.
Do you have any moments, where you were like, hey, I actually kind of got this fatherhood thing figured out? Like any big wins that come to mind?
I think just, and you'll get a little personal here for a minute, but just like a week ago, my son, I got a phone call or a text from my wife saying, that my son's friend had committed suicide. And, I was out of town and just a few hours away in St. George, just coming back that night, and just remember like my heart just sinking. Like, what do I do with this? And I remember coming home that night and finding my son, my 17-year-old, just laying on the couch, just a shell, like no emotion, like just, you could tell like he was just broken. And I feel like even though I had this big work trip I was supposed to go on, and like, I was like, I got to go to this, but I asked him, I'm like, what do you need? Do you need me to stay or do you need me to go? And he said, I need you to stay. And I still wrestled with it. Cause I'm like, this was not just like a small trip. Like this was like big deal trip, you know? And, I finally got to the point where I just, through what I'd learned in life, was able to process it in a really healthy way and just have a very introspective moment the morning I was supposed to leave on the trip, as I was just wrestling with, do I stay or do I go? And I envisioned, walking into this guy walked me through this process actually the day before in a completely different context. But he said, imagine a house with just a really long hallway, and it's just this white hallway with white doors. And imagine opening a door, and I walk through door number 1. I said, door number 1 is walk through and go on your work trip. Imagine what happens in the meetings. Imagine what happens at home, and feel all that. Feel how the coworkers and everyone feels, and then feel what your family felt while you're gone. Walked out, closed door number 1, walked down the hall, opened door number 2, walked through and said I stayed home. And that changed everything. Like it was clear. Like there was there's clarity that came where it's like, you dummy, like there's no, like but having those experiences of like how to process and think through those things gave me that sense of how to approach that. And so as I walked through that second door and felt like what it was like to have to be there with my family, and knowing like things would work themselves out at work. And then putting myself into, I like to live in a space where I think about past Eric, present Eric, and future Eric. And as I thought about future Eric and future Eric reflecting back, it was just obvious, 10 years from now, I'm not going to look back and be like, I really wish I'd gone on that work trip.
Right.
But so to me, it's just this very recent, but very real moment of like this, everything that had built up to that was like, this is just the right thing. When your kids need you, like they need you. And even though he was gone a lot of the time with friends, just dealing with all the grief, like there were key moments where I was there, and every one of my kids now knows if I need dad, like he'll be there.
Yeah.
And so it was like this really powerful, confirming, and like, yeah, I've got this piece figured out, that like being present when someone needs you. And I've told my kids, like, don't cry wolf on me, don't abuse this, but if you need me, like, I'm there. And that'll, I think, change forever many of our lives, that being in that space.
That's going to stick with those kids their whole lives.
Yeah, and me.
And probably ripple through generations, that lesson.
Yeah. And so anyway, so it's just, you just have to put yourself truly in like, what do I want? And you have to do hard things sometimes, but it makes such a big difference.
I read a quote today and I thought of you. It said, home is where your absence is felt. Mm. And that is a situation where your absence would have been felt.
Yeah. So. I tried to justify it. I was like, if I'm gone, like he'll still have his mom, he'll still have his siblings, he'll have his friends. But then I sat it and I was like, man, what if I'd just gone through something like this? I'd want all my people close by, because your people, like, they're your safe place. And me and my son, like, we just have we have a lot of similarities. Yeah. And I just knew, like, just even the hug each day, like, even if that's all it was. Yeah. Like, that mattered. Yeah.
So what have you done to guide him through this, the last week to 10 days? Like, what have you done? I'm so curious, because he's at this critical age, and there's this balance where you want to protect your kids, but you also want to make sure they learn these important lessons. So how have you navigated that?
That's a good question. We joked with another parent about it. It's like, they don't give you a handbook on this stuff, on how to approach it, right? So you're kind of, you're feeling through it. A lot of it is, we've created an environment where we can talk about hard things in our home. And it's tough because not all of his friends aren't talking necessarily. Yeah. And like we've over time built this space of like, we can talk about hard things. Rach and I talk about hard things. Like we talk about hard things. And so like, that's helped a lot, where we've been able to just have and ask questions and allow him to talk when he wants to talk. Sometimes he doesn't want to. And, like tonight, or like you could feel he was stressed, and like, do you want to talk? And he's like, no. It's like, it's okay. It's okay to be in that space. But now when he's wanting to talk, we just sit and listen with him. Lots of hugs, and just a lot of, just being there. And helping him know, like, we want you here, like, because he carries the weight of feeling like he needs to help be a strength to people around him. Yeah. And helping him feel like that's great, but come home sometimes and come be with us and recharge for a minute. And he's wanted to do that. And so finding that balance has been really healthy. It's been hard because like he's been a 4.0 student, and like this has been really disruptive with like focusing on school and things like that. And we're like, look, you do what you need to do, but he's motivated to do that. But it's like, look, if you need to not be at school, like that's fine. Like it's just allowing him to grieve in the space they need to grieve, do what they need to do, has been really helpful. And it was interesting as we finished the funeral and all the, super hard but powerful day on Saturday. I talked to him after. I said, look, like, I just thinking about what to tell you to how to keep on going. And I was like, it was very clear to me, this impression of like, don't tell him to move on, because moving on feels like just get over it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, it was just this feeling of like, Justin, you have to move with this, move forward with this, but move. And I think that's been a really just a helpful framework to be like, look, you don't have to pretend like this is tough and this is going to shape you for the rest of your life, but move with it. And also trying to help him see like, this is just a gift. Like, and this frustrates him. He's like, why does so many good things have to come up with something so bad? And as we've sat in it and said, you just got to move with this and use this for good. I was like, you're going to, he's planning on going on a mission for the church here this year. And I was like, you are going to be able to talk about love and connection and grief and life after death in a way that you never would have before. So use this like an organ donor gives their parts of their body to let someone have life. Like, let your friend's spirit move through you to give life to someone in a spiritual way. And so just really trying to like take things that are really hard and move them into something good. And that's still really hard for him, but I think just sitting, giving that type of counsel to him, and when he wants it. And otherwise it's just a lot of listening, and we're going to have him meet with a therapist and do all those other things, but just a lot of talking, a lot of listening, a lot of hugs.
Yeah,
there's been more hugs in the last week than a long time, and he's accepting them a lot more than he used to before.
Yeah. Have you felt any pressure or emotional drain being the support system for your family?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's hard. And it's been a tough couple of weeks in a lot of ways, like some high pressures at work, this stuff with my family, and like, I felt drained in a lot of ways. And you do feel like you've got to be the strong person. But I think too, like, there's power in showing that, dad breaks down sometimes too, and letting my kids know, letting my wife know, like, life's hard right now, and that's okay. Like, I think sometimes as men, we feel like we have to always be strong.
Yeah.
And, my kids have seen a lot of tears recently, and I think they see like how you can move through that in a healthy way, and that's okay. It's okay to feel. It's okay to hurt. It's okay these are normal emotions, and they're not something to fear or be afraid of, but something to, it's part of life. It's a part of our experience we're supposed to have.
That's been a consistent conversation here on the podcast, is, as men being able to talk more and show our emotions. And I think that's a more healthy way to go about it than letting it come out years later in addiction or abuse or, emotional problems. It's better to just handle it the way you have, I think. So
yeah, it hasn't always been that way though. I mean, there's plenty of times I've pent things up, and like, I'll have like my twice a year emotional breakdown because I try to be too strong all the time.
Yeah.
And it's learning like frequent pressure relief valves emotionally are way healthier and way easier to manage.
So on the other side of this, what do you do to balance that out?
For me, like, I have to create a healthy balance in my life between work, family, hobbies, everything. And that's something I've always done. And I mean, I've never got it dialed in perfectly, but I'm pretty diligent at work at making sure that, I got big responsibilities. I got to take care of them. But like, people I work with know, like, I also have a family. I'm going to take time off for vacations. I've got hobbies that are going to be important to me. I got time with my kids. I mean, so I've always been pretty stubborn about that, and selfishly looking at, like, for my own well-being, like, I will be a better employee if my life has balance to it. And so like, I've found, I've always just found different hobbies, from the time I was first married to now. Like, I've just had, I did ultimate Frisbee for like 15 years, where I played, traveled, competed, coached. Like, that was an outlet for, several hours a week, and it gave me a physical outlet and gave me connection to people. I had friends, a lot of people that I felt close to, that I could laugh with, that I could talk to. And even now, 3 or 4 years ago, I switched from ultimate frisbee to pickleball, and like the community of people that I've met, it does two things. It gives me a physical outlet. And when I don't have that, like I feel it in my life, I don't have some outlet, but also like a social outlet. I've made more friends in the last 3 years than I have in a long time. And it's not just, and some of those are just, people you go and enjoy hanging out with, but some of them are actually turning into like deeper friendships that will be lifelong friendships, or even things where, I connected with at the pickleball game Monday night, talking about suicide with one of the guys I was playing with. And like, there was a vulnerability that we both put out there with different experiences each of us had with it. Him a handful of years ago with his father, and me with my son and his friend. And like, there was just a connection that was formed. And I think oftentimes is like, you don't realize the power of vulnerability. Like our good friend Andrew Goodwin talks about that, where he's like, look, the secret to friendships is being vulnerable. And the moment you actually are vulnerable with somebody, another guy, and they become vulnerable with you, like you just have to put yourself out there, but like you create a bond and a connection that's just connects you. And we as men need that. Like, we get that hopefully with our spouses and our kids, but like there's a brotherhood that you truly feel with someone. And like those bonds are just, I don't know. I think we need more of that in our world today.
I totally agree. I feel like we've kind of started to lose that in this world, that tribe, that brotherhood. I mean, there are systems, with religion and sports groups and even work environments where we can experience that. Yeah. But I feel like in general, men are more closed off. Maybe it's due to the fact that we just don't have the balance in our lives, or the energy, the emotional energy, or time to put into that. But I feel like this podcast has kind of created that for me. I get to sit down once a week with a cool man and talk about fatherhood and struggles and experiences, and I've seen the importance of that. But on the other hand, also, what I was thinking is I've always gone to the gym, but there's something special about having a competitive outlet. Yeah. And being able to win and lose and feel that the thrill of victory and the pain of defeat. So, I like pickleball too, but we don't play much because I'm not to your level yet. But I think in the last 2 years I've started to get back into doing something competitive, and I don't know, it's helped. I really enjoy it. It's huge. And like for me, the benefit too is like with ultimate frisbee, like I'd travel and I'd take a different kid with me to different things just to build that connection there. Okay, yeah. But with pickleball, like I haven't got my daughter. I've got her out like twice, but she keeps rebelling against me. But my two boys, though, they love it. Yeah. And so like it's been this incredible space for us to be able to go like practice and train together, to compete together. And like you're talking about that, there's that competitive side, but like to be able to do that both like that's something I love, but to be able to do it with my boys. And like, there's nothing like teaching a lesson like live while you're in there with them. So like, it's one thing to like watch them compete and then talk to them about it after. It's another thing to be like in the middle of it. And how do you deal with frustration? And when you see your son like lose it mentally, and you're just like, how do I help you pull through this while I'm your teammate? And we care about the outcome. And I know you're going to be really frustrated if we don't, like, but there's been moments where we've competed in tournaments or just trained together, and I've learned some pretty good lessons with my boys in those. That's really cool. Those situations. Yeah. I'm going to call it now so I can post this in 5 years, but I think pickleball will be a high school sport. Oh yeah. And if it's not, then, our plan is to, at least with my youngest, who's 13. Yeah. We've already got plans to make it official thing at the high school. So cool. If anyone cares, he's in 7th grade. So in 2 years from now, when he's a freshman, there will be high school pickleball at Maple Mountain High School. That's awesome. Yeah. So I want to pick your brain and just have you talk about your experience of starting a business with one of your kids. Yeah. So just take me from the beginning and where it all started. Yeah. So my oldest, he's 17 now. So Justin, when he was, I think 11, he's a creative kid.
And I don't remember what sparked it, but one day he had made up a game, and he'd drawn it all out on a piece of paper, and it was this tabletop dice game. And he walked me through it, and I was like, oh, cool, like show me it. And so we played it out, and we did it on the table. I was like, oh, this is a ton of fun. And I was like, this could be something that we could turn into a product. And one of our good friends, Sean Watkins, I took it over to him. I was like, hey, what do you think? And I had him show it to him because he's an entrepreneur. And
yeah,
he's like, yeah, it was fun. And so it was into this like initial start there. And I don't remember how much later it was, but something had sparked us around yard games. Or like, yard games are a fun thing. They bring people together. And I had this the thought, I'm like, Justin, what if like we took your idea and blew it up and made it bigger? We took it and turned it into a yard game. So he invented the whole thing, the whole concept, everything. And I just said, let's make it at a bigger scale. So we went to the local hardware store and picked up some materials, built it, and made our first set. He's probably like 12 years old. And we go through and we build this whole thing, and we started to play it and invite people over, and people are like, yeah, this is, people are having fun with it. I'm like, this could actually be something. And I'm like, we can just build this out of wood. And my wife's like, are you kidding? You're going to ship something that weighs 40 pounds to everywhere? And I'm like, okay, that's a horrible idea. So we had a lot of people then that started to engage with us with this idea. People who had ideas around what materials to use, how to approach, I took Justin with me to talk to all these different people. We talked to our buddy Sean, who walked us through, how you could do a Kickstarter and how to do things successfully there to get some funding to be able to do things, and talked us through advertising. And we just found so many different people that we were able to connect together with. And what was fun, he's like 13 at the time.
Yeah.
So he's this kid, but he's like a really smart kid, but he's like just picking all this stuff up. But we're just like learning together. Yeah. Or Jace here helped me. We were, figuring out like, okay, how do we make this ad for our Kickstarter campaign? And how do we build this out? And there's just so many people that were just willing to help. And so we, launched the campaign, and, even got news outlets covering it. He got to be interviewed in multiple places. So we just opened up all these doors to talk to a guy who did patents and helped with legal stuff, talking to manufacturers, talking to, people helping with with campaigns, and just exposed him to this entire world of things, but all based upon his original idea. And we were both just learning together, which made it fun because I didn't know all this stuff. Yeah. I just knew who to talk to, and people were so willing to come and help out. And so finally we launched Kickstarter. Nothing, it didn't quite pan out. We had like a $15,000 goal, and I think we raised 9,000 of it, which was still really awesome
which is all or nothing, right?
It's all or nothing. Yeah. So we didn't get it.
Yeah.
I'm like, dang, we should have just set it for 9,000. We got our goal.
Yeah.
We finished that whole thing, and I remember asking him, like, what do you want to do? Like, do you want to do this? And I had a buddy that someone connected us to a way to, that shifted our mindset around how to approach it, to be like, oh, I got to get this custom mold to use something that already exists and do a version 1 to get it out there, test the product. And for like $10,000, we could launch this whole thing. And I said, if you want to do it, I'll invest in this. I believe in the importance I believe this has potential, and I believe like this is an important life experience for us. He said, yeah, let's do it, Dad. And so we did it. And so we went and, connected with manufacturers in China, got everything. We went through everything, did all the branding and the trademarks, and, had him with me for all those things as we were just learning together. And, eventually launched the company, and, went to trade shows, had him sell different ways, and he learned he hates sales. It's like, I'll never do it. I made him like sit in places, and he actually did really well. Like,
that's a great age to learn that.
It's a great thing to learn that. But there was one summer where we had him go sit at the Parade of Homes, and he had a booth set up, and for 2 weeks, every day he had to go for like 5-6 hours, and paid him like $20 each set he sold, and he sold over 100, and he made like 120. He made $2,400 in 2 weeks. I'm like, you realize in 2 weeks you made as much as your friends made all summer working at Subway?
Yeah.
And he still's like, no, I hate this. But like the whole process though, we finally sold, we bought 500 units. We sold out 500 units. And at the end of it, I said, what do you want to do? Like, do you want to keep this going? And he's like, and we both realized like this has been our experience. And so we shut the business down the beginning of last year. But like for 5 years, we just had it was like 5 years, we just had this experience together. just to learn and to try stuff, and just awesome. Just gave him exposure to so many different elements of business, of entrepreneurship, of sales, of all those things that just gave him perspective to help even me know how to guide him as he figures out what's his path forward. And so just a incredible experience. Yeah.
A lesson I want to teach my kids is when they have a goal or a business idea or whatever, to jump all in and believe in themselves and just pursue it.
Yeah.
And have that zeal for life.
Yeah.
And I feel like one of the best ways to do that is something like this, where both of you can learn together.
Yeah.
And you can kind of guide your kid through that whole process.
Yeah.
And man, the lessons that he learned are going to affect his whole life, and whatever career path he chooses.
Yeah.
You're always going to have to sell. You're always going to have to, be able to present yourself, brand yourself.
Yeah.
There's so many lessons. So yeah, I was so happy to be involved in, in my little way in that process, but, just observing, from afar, that relationship that you have with your boy was really cool. And it allowed me to think about, what I want to do with my kids, the experiences I want to have. And I would love to be able to start a business with each of my kids.
Yeah.
Even if it shuts down after five years, the lessons and the memories that you guys made are so much more valuable than the dollars that you can put on it.
Yeah.
Did you ever go through a phase where you're like, oh man, maybe we shouldn't do this, but he kept pushing, or was he just all in, or did you have to talk him into it, or how did that go?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely wasn't, he was all in the whole time. There were parts that he really enjoyed. And there's moments I had to really push him to say, we got to go do this. We made this decision to do this, and had to push through it. I mean, it wasn't all this is just fun and exciting. I remember many times a new order pops in and it's hey, you got to go, because he was the fulfiller.
Yeah. You gotta go ship it out.
I was go put it together and go get the box ready and go get ready to ship. And it's 10 o'clock at night and I'm you got customers. And he didn't love those moments, but I think it's important to show the non-glamorous part of it all, because it turns out work's not always just fun and exciting.
Yeah.
So a lot of highlights I think that happened through it, where he saw when you'd see people having fun and doing it, but a lot of moments where it's just pushing through, and just saying, hey, we can do this.
What did your wife think of all this?
She loved it. She thought it was great. She's super supportive of it. And, I imagine had it been reversed and she had some crazy idea and needed $10,000 or something, I'd be we shouldn't do that. But she's yeah, go do it. We'd had some money from, our other company that we've got. And I said, let's invest this in it. She said, let's do it. And she was just 100% supportive of it. And she loves seeing it, but she just knows, she senses stuff. And so she feels it's right. Turns out it's going to be all right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such an important part, in a marriage. For me, at least, Katie's my balance, because I have all these crazy ideas. And if it weren't for her, I'd probably be broke and have 10 different failed business ideas. But the but here is she lets me pursue stuff.
Yeah.
If I have a plan.
Yeah.
And, because I'm always going to be passionate about all these different ideas. It's part of who I am. But she kind of reels me in, but still lets me pursue those goals.
Yeah.
And
Rach does that for me too, where it's I've got this, she can tell, and I can see the look on her face when I get these big ideas. And she's just I can tell she's already this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
But then she just has this and it's taken me, and I'm still figuring it out, but it's taken me 20 years of marriage to be turns out every time you know something that I'm you can't possibly know, but she just knows it, she's always right. 100%. Things that I'm you can't know that. And then it just works out. And so it's actually really nice if I can trust that, to know I'm not ever going to do anything super stupid, because she'll keep me in line.
But, from an outside perspective, I've always observed you and pictured you as a pretty calculated person.
I am. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I'm a calculated person.
Yeah.
And she feels her way through it.
Yeah.
And she knows better than me, even though I've calculated it. My calculations don't allow for risks. Her intuition allows for risk, because she knows it's going to work out. It's the craziest thing, but
pretty good match.
Yeah. It drives her crazy. But.
So if you were to put together a virtual tool belt for fatherhood, what are some of the items that you'd put on there?
That's a good question. I'm going to very like big subjective things, but like love is like number one. That unconditional love piece, got to have it. Finding just time, that presence. You can't replace being present. You can't fake that. Mm-hmm. One thing that we've been, just a recent lesson we've learned in our family is it's not about what you're doing, but it's who you're doing it with. And so even taking the tool belt of time and presence, equating to, it doesn't matter if you're doing the dishes, do it with somebody. It doesn't matter if you're cleaning out the car, do it with somebody. It doesn't matter if you're playing a sport or going on a hike, but just do it with somebody. So time and presence, like, doesn't matter what you're doing. The fact that you're doing it with someone you love, like, huge. Be able to listen and hear anything, even if it's something you don't want to hear. So the tool of just unconditional listening, that even the things they don't want to tell you, they feel safe telling you, because they know you can do it without judgment, which is really hard when they tell you stuff that you don't want to hear. But you'd rather be there with them through those hard things than not. So love, time, listening, being present, and those are probably the big ones.
I think that's a pretty good
throw on there. Yeah.
You could build a lot with that.
You can build a lot with that. Yeah.
Well, one last question. I always end my podcast with this question. We've kind of hit on it, but it's what if there's one lesson you could leave with your kids when you're no longer here, what would that lesson be?
Yeah, I think we've touched on a lot of it, but it's just it really does go back to just that love matters more than anything. I think about the two great commandments, which are love God and love your neighbor. Just being kind and loving people there's no replacement for it. People feel that and people need it, man. Like, you talk about mental health, you talk about what everyone's struggling with something. Everyone's got something heavy in their heart. Everyone is dealing with something. And so I think just this idea of give grace and love to every person that you see, that you interact with, knowing that they've got something. I think there's a reason that Jesus said to love your enemy, because the enemies are often ones that are dealing with some of the hardest stuff. They just aren't processing it and putting it out into the world in the best way. And so even those that are the hardest, like, that kindness and love is just, that's it. Like, you do that, like, life is good. And so I think I hope they can feel that from me. And I hope that's something that they can give to everyone around them, because there's no better gift you can give anybody.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being on. Thanks for sharing your insights, your thoughts, and stories. And I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Cool.
Thanks, Jace.